Los Angeles, 2007. George Torres has California at his fingertips with branches of his supermarket, Numero Uno, spread all across the state, making Torres a multi-millionaire before he was 50 years old. But one of California's most successful businessmen also held a dark secret, one that shocked the world, as we take a look inside the underground empire of the most brutal gangster in California.
At 6 p.m., 5 men shot on Hillcrest. 30 minutes later, a man is shot 3 times. Another gang shooting 35 minutes after that on Santa Rosalia. A 16-year-old shot twice. Then at 8:30, the same night, 2 more gang-related shootings.
June 12, 1997, and multi-millionaire George Torres goes about his morning routine, completely unaware of the danger coming his way. As he drove to work, he could not have expected what came next, as the FBI pulled him over and placed him under arrest. Of course, they had the warrant they needed and took him to LA County, where he was placed on a no-bail hold, meaning he wasn't going anywhere soon. His arrest took many by surprise, but the list of charges against him was shocking. He was faced with serious charges of racketeering. In fact, the FBI believed they had enough evidence to prove Torres was using his huge supermarket business as a front for a criminal empire so large it could rival the biggest mafias in America. Rarely has someone gone from hero to zero as quickly as Torres went from admired businessman to notorious mafia boss. But how did this one man build such a powerful empire under the noses of the authorities? His story will shock you. Born in 1957 to 2 Mexican farm workers, George Torres came from very humble beginnings, starting out in South Downtown selling food from a cart. Most food carts were tagged by gangs, but Torres managed to keep himself and build up a successful empire among the chaos of the city. He was respected by his customers and was known for his high work ethic even at a very young age. By 1974, he was working in the El Tapatio grocery stores, and was here that he would meet one person who would change his life forever. He fell in love with Roberta Flores, the owner's daughter, and by 1976, they were married. With the help of his new father-in-law, he was able to secure a loan in the 1980s that would give him the chance to open his very own business. He took over a liquor store and immediately restocked it with meat and produce and renamed it Numero Uno. One of the keys to his success is that he provided his customers with fresh produce in areas that they may not normally have access to, due to major supermarkets avoiding these areas. His store gained a reputation for being clean, friendly, and relatively trouble-free, and he soon bought his second market and was well on the way to building his open empire. As it turns out, the secret of Torres' success was more sinister than just hard work, and what he did to rise to the top will send chills down your spine. By the mid-1980s, Torres had begun to show up on the FBI's radar. This was in part due to the meteoric rise in his market and some highly suspicious criminal activity. They began to look more closely into the business dealings of Torres after an associate and supplier he used were convicted of murder. But to the people who knew him from Numero Uno, Torres was seen as a community leader and local entrepreneur, and even helped out during the infamous LA riots of 1992.
They're dispatching LAPD units along with all fire trucks that respond to major emergency blazes for protection. But with respect to trying to get LAPD service or anything else, folks, you're on your own down there.
So he started up from the bottom up, and he came up, and people didn't like that. You know what I mean? He helped the people around there. What does it say in the
He hired your son, right?
He hired me too.
But his work for the community could not deter from the fact that Torres had gained a reputation as a very dangerous man who was not afraid to get his hands dirty. In 1993, a security guard at Numero Uno was fatally shot. Conveniently, the man who pulled the trigger, Shorty Maldonado, wound up dead himself, and Torres and his brother were both suspected of ordering the hit. Then in 1994, a gang member that tried to extort money from Numero Uno and another employee who allegedly stole money were both murdered, and police were highly suspicious that Torres was responsible. He allegedly exercised brutal control of his organization and associates. He intimidated and murdered potential witnesses against the enterprise and used his numerous markets to aid his fraud and tax violations. There had been rumors of connections to Mexican organized crime, and around that time he began to expand his business beyond his markets, branching out into nightclubs, bars, and restaurants. Early into his 50s, he had a business worth over $200 million and the world at his fingertips. But his criminal activities would also include the sale of illegal narcotics, and Torres was not shy about who he sold it to or the damage it would do to the local communities. In 2007, after years of investigations, surveillance, and informants, the FBI finally had enough to bring their man in and uncover the true horrors behind the Numero Uno success. The indictment accused 8 defendants of violating the Federal Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Along with George Torres, there was his brother, Manuel, his son, Stephen, and other associates facing various charges. The FBI issued 5 search warrants at residences, Numero Uno markets, and warehouses. Special Agent Rum later said of the arrest that the greed of these criminals has infiltrated our communities and business, bringing violence to our streets. Those arrested in this investigation are part of an organization that has brought crime, violence, and drugs to our street corners in order to bolster their personal wealth. This investigation shows that the continued cooperative efforts between federal, state, and local law enforcement results in criminals at every level of society being brought to justice. City officials were also implicated in the case, as they accepted bribes off Torres, which allowed him to expand his empire even further and operate under the radar. The charges against Torres would carry a life sentence if found convicted, and those were only for the racketeering charges. With a whole host of other allegations, Torres was faced with life in prison and an end to his illegal activities once and for all. But this case would be marred by controversy, as an LA judge decided to throw out the most serious racketeering charges, which would dramatically reduce the sentence of the convicted. Even more shocking, he allowed Torres to be released on the condition he attends future hearings without fail. The reasons the charges were thrown out? Potentially exculpatory evidence from an informant. It turns out one detective was so obsessed with catching Torres that he jeopardized the entire case with some suspicious evidence.
A judge has tossed out racketeering convictions against the founder of a Southern California grocery store chain. George Torres, founder of Numero Uno stores, was released from jail after federal prosecutors discovered a jailhouse recording that may clear him of charges that he ordered a rival killed. He was released on $1 million bond after the judge threw out racketeering and conspiracy convictions.
Detective Greg Katting was determined to nail the case against Torres so badly that the defense claimed he had gone rogue. The judge even threw out some of the evidence against Torres, declaring Detective Katting of reckless disregard for the truth after it was discovered he had misquoted conversations from surveillance. The controversy did not stop there, as the defense would try their hardest to discredit much of the evidence Katting had provided. Star witnesses faced threats and bribes in order to take the stand. Others were offered help to stay out of trouble or get an early release from prison, and Katting was even caught supplying the very answers he wanted to other key witnesses. Another witness was allegedly threatened with arrest on other charges should they not provide the information needed. The defense complained that vital evidence was not turned over, and even claimed one defense attorney received a free satellite navigation system for his car arranged by Katting. The prosecution would use Katting as a scapegoat, and in the end, the judge ruled a new trial was needed with several racketeering charges dropped. Throughout his criminal career, Torres had bribed and bought many city officials in order to gain the permits needed to expand. Although it's unlikely that these officials would have any sway in the judicial process, it certainly raises questions around the trial. The case against him would challenge the notion that this simple businessman was, in fact, a dangerous crimes lord who had been implicated in years of investigations, some linked directly to Mexican cartels and beyond. The FBI had been following him for years, and they did not want to lose their chance to put Torres behind bars and keep the streets a little cleaner. All of the assets Torres had gained were seized by the FBI, with the intention to forfeit them. On April 20th, 2009, after a long trial that at times looked like it could go either way, the judge and jury found George Torres guilty of an astonishing 55 felonies. This included the murder of gang member Shorty Maldonado and bribing City Commissioner Steve Kimona. He was also found guilty of 46 tax violations, mail fraud, and harboring illegal aliens. A shocking rap sheet for someone who masqueraded as an innocent businessman. The defense argument that the witness testimony came from other felons who had agreed to talk in return for lighter sentences proved they may have been telling the truth, or at least distorting it in their own favor.
According to this indictment, George Torres is a sinister crime boss. If you're trying to write your own finale to The Sopranos, this indictment might be the place to start.
Despite threats of police misconduct during the trial, the verdict finally went in favor of the prosecution, and this dangerous crime boss is safely behind bars, where he will remain for a very long time. His brother managed to evade justice after it was determined the prosecution had failed to provide enough evidence against him to implicate him in the criminal organization. George Torres went from successful entrepreneur to shamed crime lord almost overnight. Despite the controversies, the prosecution were able to seal a conviction and take one more dangerous criminal off the streets for a very long time.